Hi, I'm Holly and welcome to my channel, Holly Go Read. Today we're going to be doing my February wrap-up. Let's just dive on in because we've got a fair amount of books. Well, not a fair amount, 9. So let's talk about the books I read in February. First off, I've already done a review on this, so anybody who has seen it knows just how much I love this book, and that was Sadie by Courtney Summers. I've also done a makeup look based on this, and actually the makeup that I'm wearing right now, so be looking out for that. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This is a YA thriller. It's received a lot of hype here on BookTube. I haven't had the best track record with hyped books, as you'll see later on in this video, but this one was definitely a winner for me. We follow our main character Sadie, and we also have a different perspective told from the view of a podcast narrator named West. Ooh, this book is good. It's topsy-turvy. A lot of heavy trigger warnings. Check out my review video for all of that great information, but highly recommend this book. This one had me thinking for so long. I mean, if you haven't read it, haven't heard anything about it, go pick up this book, watch my review, something, because this book is banging. And it got me out of my YA slump. Last month I was having a problem where I just wasn't liking the hyped YA books. This one definitely broke that slump for me. So good. And I didn't even think I liked thrillers. I mean, this one, dang. The second book I read in February was Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. This book was shelved for me as young adult, but I read it more as new adult, as all of the characters were legal adults. The main character attending UT Austin. I actually live in Austin, so as an Austin resident, there were a lot of Austin-y references that were very cool for me. But all in all, rated it a 3. This book follows Penny and Jude kind of on separate tracks for a lot of the book. Penny is a Korean-American student at the University of Texas, Austin. She is studying writing. Her storyline kind of revolves around how she interacts with her mom, who is kind of portrayed as a ditzy, kind of embarrassing MILF type character. And then her dealing with her roommates, who you kind of like get from Penny that they're not very likable, but I feel like outside of Penny's scope they might have been. And then we have Jude, who is this tattooed soft boy who works at a coffee house, who really wants to be a documentary filmmaker. Very interesting characters, and then kind of how they come together and become each other's emergency contacts. That's the basic synopsis for you. My opinions on the book. The good for me were Penny and Jude's relationship. It definitely wasn't insta-lovey. So if insta-love annoys you, this might be a read for you. It is Own Voices work. Mary H.K. Choi is actually a Korean American who went to UT Austin. This book does cover some kind of heavy material, which I feel like it handled well, primarily parental neglect and toxic relationships, but there should be a trigger warning for rape. I feel like they handled it well, but if that is something that triggers you, please be aware before reading Emergency Contact. Okay, and the bad. If you're a big dialogue person, like me, I'm a big dialogue person. I love dialogue in books, and dialogue heavy books are something I really enjoy. The book was trying too hard to sound like teenagers, which is weird because I mean they were like 18 and 19, who generally don't, the mass majority that I know don't speak in heavily teenagerized language. If you were to pick this up in 10 years, I think it'll be unreadable. There's just too many words that are specific to that point in time. There's a lot of bad, weird, judgmental commentary coming from Penny's internal monologues. A lot of them are really funny. Like, I found myself laughing out loud at a lot of points. She makes lists in her head. She has some anxiety issues, I think, that she lists things out, and she's a germaphobe as well. But they never address it, which is another problem I have. You can't really tell if she has obsessive compulsive order or germophobia. She has a lot of these quirks and things about her that I feel like it was almost using mental illness as a trope without actually declaring her mentally ill. That's just gonna have to be up to you to decide. I know a lot of people really like this book. I know a lot of people really hated this book. For me, it's middle of the road. It was a 3. So I don't really know where to say to recommend it. I mean, maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I kind of stand it'll be forgettable for me. So next up, I read Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is another adult novel that is very character driven. This follows Elsie. The basic story is she's been married for less than 2 weeks and her husband is killed in an accident. When she arrives at the hospital, she meets her husband Ben's mother for the first time. And really, his mom finds out for the first time that Elsie exists. She did not know that Elsie and Ben were married, and it kind of follows their grieving process, and in Taylor Jenkins Reid's style, has kind of a flip-flop of perspectives timeline-wise. So we're following Emily and Ben falling in love, where we're also watching Elsie and Ben's mother cope with the grieving process of him dying. This was Taylor Jenkins Reid's debut. I'm personally really glad that I did not read her books in the order in which they were written. I feel like this was not her strongest work, but to me that says something even better about Taylor Jenkins Reid, is she has improved so much since Forever Interrupted. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, After I Do, what's the other one that I like? One True Loves and One True Loves. Those are much better written in my perspective, in my opinion. In Forever Interrupted, the switch back and forth between the two timelines wasn't done as seamlessly as well as it has been done in some of her other later works. This book is just sad, and like, you know from the blurb it's gonna be sad. You're well aware from the get-go, like, Ben dies in like chapter 1. So you know this is going to be a sad book. But it was hard to like root for their love story when you knew from the beginning how it was going to end. Where like with One True Loves, you don't know how the story is going to end. You know that her husband isn't dead when she thought he was, but you still don't know who she's going to end up with. There's still some mystery to that. So yeah, I think this set her up for her much better later works. But personally, I think I could have skipped Forever Interrupted. I went ahead and I gave it a 3, which is the lowest I've ever rated one of her books. Okay, so the next book I read was Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nan. This book was very highly anticipated. There was a lot of talk about this book. And I've seen a lot of hype and a lot of love for this book on Twitter and on BookTube. I did not enjoy it as much as some other people did. I rated it a 3 on Goodreads, and that was being pretty generous of me. So the basic synopsis, if you haven't heard about Girls of Paper and Fire. Essentially, this is a fantasy world based on Asian mythology. So this is Own Voice's work. Natasha Nan is British Vietnamese. So she drew from Asian mythology to create a world of basically cast. The paper cast, which are humans. The steel cast is the human demon mix. The moon cast is the pure demons. Essentially what is happening here in our story, Lee is a paper girl, or is of the paper cast, and she is basically selected to be a concubine to this demon king. Supposedly, in the description, we were following her on an adventure to kind of overthrow this kingdom. I think this book kind of falls into the trap of taking too much time to set up the world and not creating a good first installation. I think this will probably be one of those books that goes on, or one of those series that goes on to be better because you have a good world to build from, but it didn't, in my opinion, do a good enough job of telling the story at hand. So just let's get some good things out of the way. The diversity. And this is an Asian MC in an Asian mythology based world. That's great to see. There is a female-female romance, which, you know, glad to see more diversity and more representation, especially in YA. This book was very atmospheric, which I did appreciate. Natasha Ngan did do a lot of work to build her universe. Like I said, I think this is gonna go on to be a much better series. And then Ren. So there is a character, her name is Ren. She is another one of the concubines of the Demon King. And personally, I think this book would have been 20 times better had it been told from her perspective. Because, let's talk about the bad. Lee is the most boring character ever. She kind of falls into that Mary Sue trap for me. Like, the only thing interesting about her is her eyes. The only character trait they give her is making her clumsy. I didn't like her. I didn't. There was nothing interesting about her. Everything just happens to her, except for in the last 2 to 3 chapters of the book when she finally does something. Yeah. I didn't find her brave. I didn't find her interesting. Like I said, this book would have been 20 million times better had it been from Ren's perspective. Okay, another one of my complaints here. The Mooncast descriptions were not great. The Bull Demon King. Are they supposed to look like minotaurs? I just couldn't picture them. I really couldn't. Just the blend of animal and demon and human just didn't, I don't feel like it was fleshed out well enough. Like, the Steel cast made sense. They were basically humans with some animal-like features, like horns or antlers or cat ears or things like that. That made sense. But then you've got like lizard demons and bull demons, and then you're also talking about them having human features, like being able to have sexual relations and kiss and things like that with humans. It's weird. I don't understand it. And it took me out of the universe too many times because I couldn't figure out what this dude looked like, and it was bugging me. There's a lot of victim blaming, a lot of mean girl trope shenanigans that I just didn't really enjoy. And then the thing that bugged me the most was the plot. There was no plot until like the last 20% of the book. It was just kind of like, we're following Lee. She's doing nothing about her situation. That's cool. This world's really pretty. Ain't nothing happening. Yeah, it was very predictable. The plot twist at the end was not at all surprising. See, and I truly believe this book is gonna fall into one of those. You just have to make it through the first book. The second book's so much better. I have a deep, deep problem with that setup. I want good books to be good from the beginning. I want series to be good from the beginning. I don't think if you don't do the work to make a compelling story from the get-go, I'm not gonna keep investing my time. That being said, this was not my opportunity to be seen in literature. So for those who are of Asian descent, who did get to see something of their culture or their mythology in this book, I absolutely, you know, want to give you that opportunity to enjoy this book. I don't censure you in any way for enjoying it. I personally did not enjoy it because mainly the plot. The plot is what bugged me the most. Even if it, and again, I think it was told from the wrong perspective. I think had it been told from Ren's point of view, we would have had a much more interesting book. But what can you do? The author makes her choices. So yeah, Girls of Paper and Fire was, again, a very, very generous 3 for me. And next up, we had A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Barnard. I thoroughly loved this book. I gave it a 5. This follows Reese and Steffi. Steffi has severe anxiety to the point of selective mutism, and Reese is deaf. He is also biracial. He is British and Guyanese. Love this book. Love it. If you want to watch my full review, I will link that up there too. No idea if I'm pointing in the right direction, but you know, up there somewhere. But yeah, this book is adorable. It is your more typical YA romance. Because Steffi is selectively mute, she does know a little bit of BSL. This does take place in Britain, so this is British ASL, or British Sign Language. So they are able to communicate and kind of develop a friendship that eventually turns into a relationship. This is super, super cute, like crack a tooth, kind of sweet. Really great involved parents, believable storyline. Just if you're looking for really great representation, really great romance, this is super cute, and I highly, highly recommend it because I adore it. They're just too cute for words. And if like non-existent parents trope of bums you out in YA, this is not that kind of book. We got parents everywhere. It's great. Cannot say enough good things about this book. Okay, next up I read The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. I figured since it was Black History Month, I needed to finally face The Hate U Give. I've heard a lot about it and I'd kind of been avoiding it because I did know that it dealt with some pretty serious subject matter. I'm fairly sure everyone here on BookTube knows the premise of The Hate U Give, but in case you don't, we do follow teenage Star, who witnesses a police shooting and is dealing with the aftermath. Star is a very unique perspective because she kind of has a foot in two different worlds. Her father is had served prison time for being involved with some gang members. He actually got his out by going to prison, so she kind of knows that world, and then lives in a pretty bad neighborhood. Add to that, she also goes to a very nice, predominantly white school, and has a white boyfriend. So this kind of gives her very unique perspectives on these two very different worlds. Add to that, the uncle who she adores and thought of basically as a second father while her father was in prison is a police officer, actually a detective himself. So lots going into that situation, and she does witness the shooting of her friend, and kind of deals with the aftermath of that. I won't say that I enjoyed this book. To me, it wasn't the kind of book to be enjoyed. It was the kind of book that challenged. It made me challenge my worldview. It made me challenge my privilege. It made me think. And I gave it 5 stars because to me, even more than enjoying a book that can challenge me, particularly a YA contemporary that can challenge me, says a lot. It was really good. Angie Thomas wrote this book very authentically. It is told through Star's first person perspective, so it is written a lot in African American vernacular English. So if you're not very familiar with that speech pattern, that can be a little jarring, but I feel like it added so much more to the authenticity of the book. Again, I feel like this is just one of those books that everybody should read when they have that emotional capacity, because I do feel like it challenges you. It makes you look at things differently and makes you, I feel like it only increases your empathy, which we can all use more of. So I'm very glad that I did get around to reading it this month. Highly, highly recommend giving it a read if you haven't yet. And next up, following my rereading Riordan challenge to myself, I read The Battle of the Labyrinth. Honestly, this one was probably one of the weaker installations in Percy Jackson and the Olympians for me. It did a lot to set up the last book, and in that it kind of lost its way. I rated it a 3.5. Again, I mean, all of Riordan's books are funny. This one just kind of got muddled for me. It wasn't his best, you know? It was basically the setup for the last book. which, you know, at book 4, I feel like you can get away with that a little bit more than you can at like a book 1. And I mean, Riordan, I'm noticing a bit of a pattern with these books. The odd numbers, so 1, 3, and 5 are better than 2 and 4. They're kind of bridges between those, which with this long of a structure I'm kind of okay with, because it started off really well, and then we have a little bit of a lull to set up for the next big spike, and then we have a little bit of a lull to get ready for the actual climax of the series. So, not my favorite, but we do see the first instance of Perkabeth, so I can't be too mad at it. Yeah. And then the next book I read was Love, Hate, and Other Filters by Samira Ahmed. Somebody else phrased this very well. Love, Hate, and Other Filters is basically The Hate You Give meets Jenny Han from To All the Boys I Loved Before. It had a lot of that coming of age, as well as hitting some very, very hard topics. This follows Maya, who is a Muslim American, in kind of her journey through her last year of high school before she's getting ready for college. We have some anti-Muslim sentiment going on due to a terrorist attack that happens throughout the storyline. So there were a lot of people that had problems with this book reading the Goodreads reviews. A lot of people from that community had a problem with the way Maya was represented, the way Muslim culture and religion was represented. You don't see a lot of her religion in practice, which I think a lot of people had a problem, but I also saw so many reviews where people from the Muslim community were coming and saying this book was great. It was, you know, being seen. So I'll leave the representation of Muslim culture and faith to those that it represents. I can't really speak to that. I also can't speak to the experience of being a first-generation American. I thought it was done well, but again, that is not my experience. So I will leave that to those that is their experience to weigh in on whether that is a realistic representation of what it's like to be a first-generation Indian American. So let's talk about the good. For me, this book struck a really great balance between the fun and the serious. You get a lot of the seriousness, a lot of the heavy topic, but the funness of the romance kind of kept the pace moving, which I really appreciated. It very much reads like a rom-com. Something I will say about the writing, for as much as it reads like a rom-com, it also kind of reads like a screenplay, because Maya is an aspiring filmmaker. She uses a lot of terminology and phrases things in a way that you very much picture it like it's a movie, which I really liked. It was very dynamic and interesting to kind of picture in my head from the perspective of how she pictured it being filmed. I think this is one of those books that would be very easily adaptable and would be very pretty visually. I really respect that Ahmed, the author, did not overuse teen speak. They sounded very normal, which I feel like will allow this book to age better than some of the other books I mentioned previously. The romance was really cute. It was a little insta-lovey. Okay, it was a lot insta-lovey, but it was cute. And it got a little bit too much screen time for me, considering the whole kind of love triangle thing that happens. But, you know, it was cute, and I love soft boys, and we have a soft boy in this. I love them. I love my cinnamon rolls. I love squishy soft boys, and whew, we got us a squishy soft boy in this one. Loved it. Also, we have some very nice, healthy female friendships. You do not get to see that a lot in YA, in my opinion, and I very much enjoyed that we got a very good representation of healthy female friendship in this book. So this one, Love, Hate, and Other Filters, did for me what I wanted from When Dimple Met Rishi. We have a main character who has a very focused passion that goes against the norms of their culture, but to me, more than Dimple did in When Dimple Met Rishi, Maya stuck a lot more to her passion, and it was the forefront more than in When Dimple Met Rishi, where I feel like that kind of faded and failed in my opinion. Because Maya is hardly ever without her camera or thinking in the way of filters and framing, and it was much clearer that this was her passion, this was her love, this was her life. It didn't feel like a phase or a hobby, where I feel like Dimple in some way, her coding was basically a phase. So this book does tackle some pretty big things. We're talking about Islamophobia, racism, current events like the Muslim ban that was suggested at one point here in America. The way the author phrased these was very relatable. So as a Hispanic American, I know what it's like to be told to go home, that you're illegal, even when my family has been here for 5 generations. I know what it's like to be judged for being brown. So I felt a kinship there. It's not the same for Muslims, Middle Eastern people as what Hispanic people face. They're different and varied in their own ways, but I do feel like in a way, especially given reading the afterword that Ahmed wrote, it felt like this book was in some way for me because it helped me feel seen. That idea of, this is my home, I'm just living my life, man. And watching Maya kind of deal with that racism was something that I could identify with. Even not being Middle Eastern and that not being my experience, just as a Hispanic American, I can identify with it, and it only increased my empathy for the character. The not so good things about this book, the love triangle, it felt a little unnecessary and a little tropey, but you know, it's YA, I let it happen. Some questionable cheating, and it got a little too much screen time in my opinion. The subplot regarding the terrorist attack took a little too long to come to the forefront for me. I really thought that was going to be more the meat of the book. It took a little too long to get there. Now, Ahmed made a stylistic choice that I don't think served her message the best. Interspersed throughout the book, we get this unauthored voice that is the terrorist, and it kind of leaves clues to make you think that the terrorist is one person or one type of person, and kind of leading you astray, and then also kind of giving you the mindset of the terrorist. And almost a lot of people, and myself included, kind of felt like this was the author trying to make us feel sympathy for the terrorist, which was confusing. I didn't really understand why that was there. Like all of the events of the book, without those interspersed views from the point of view of the terrorist, the book would have been fine without those. I feel like they were unnecessary and confused the message. So that led me to rate the book 4 stars rather than 5. Had those not been there and the message not been muddled, I probably would have given it a 5. And the last book that I read this month was the conclusion to the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. This one I did rate a 5 because I feel like this book ended the series very, very well. For this still being middle grade, we have some more darkness, some harder decisions, loss, betrayal, just everything. Percy and Annabeth, and you know, I get my Perkbeth canon, and it's just really good. It ended the series in a way that feels complete but still leaves the door open for the later expansion of the universe. Very much enjoyed it. Made me laugh, it made me cry. Still get teary-eyed over a certain character's death. It's just good. It's so good. And this made me remember why I so loved this series, especially after Battle of the Labyrinth was a little bit of a letdown for me from my memory. Last Olympian did not disappoint. This really did bookend the series very well for me. This month I'll be moving on to the Kane Chronicles, be reading the first two in the month of March to keep pace for the release of the Tyrant's Tomb much later this year. So rereading all the Rick Riordan books. That was the last book I read in February. Haven't really been feeling reading going into March here. Been binge rewatching Criminal Minds. So now I'm paranoid every time a floorboard creaks. But anyway, yeah, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed my wrap up. If you've read any of the books, have any opinions, let me know down in the comments. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Holly, and go read.